Tag, meine Damen und Herren, and welcome to the look at the history of the Großtraktor, or the Neubaufahrzeug, translated roughly to large tractor slash new construction vehicle. Of course, this name was given to the vehicle to cover up the fact that Germany was still developing a tank, as they were not really allowed to do this after the signing of the Versailles Treaty. Of course, not allowed to have tanks in their military, but they did start developing them under different names, mainly tractors. Now, before I go on, and I need to talk a little bit about the 1920s and the dawn of the super tanks, mainly the British A1 Independence, which started a new arms race of multi-turreted long tanks. The idea was the next war would be, of course, fought in trenches and very stale and slow-moving. This was wrong. With Germany rearming and a new leader coming to power, the Reichswehr needed a tank. Since the 1920s, they had been testing a new tractor, in air quotes there, with their friends the Russians. How times change. Two prototypes were born, the Daimler and the Rheinmetall designs, helping the development of a new design with shades of the Vickers A1 Independence tank, mixed with the own German design. This being possible, of course, being aided by a spy, basically, Norman Bailey Stewart, who got the blueprints for the A1 Independence before ending up in the Tower of London, the last person to be imprisoned there, I do believe. Now, Rheinmetall and Krupp both presented prototypes for a new tank after the Großtraktor, and both were very similar to each other in their design. Being the turrets the main difference, the Rheinmetall variant, the Type A, had the 37mm KWK above the 75mm KWK, whereas the Krupp design, or Type B, had it to the side. Although two Type A were actually built using mild steel and just basic welds, just to really have it as a sort of prototype and a workhorse, just a development vehicle. The Type B was the main sort of vehicle that actually got built in a bit larger numbers and with the correct armour, correct metals being used. Three of the Type Bs were eventually built, although there are apparently some Type 4s and Type 5s possibly in that mix. There was also looking at a 105 variant which would fire smoker shells from its 105mm howitzer, but there's not really much on that vehicle. Now, in the mid-1930s, the Panzer Corps got their hands on the NBFZ. Although smaller than many other super tanks at the time, the NBFZ was sort of a monster compared to the other tanks in the German military. It shared the turret of the Panzer 1/2 and 3 and 4, really. It sort of had a very similar turret, and bits of it were taken and put onto the tank, slightly changed and modified to fit the larger guns. The 23-ton tank was powered by a BMW VA or a Maybach HL engine, giving it roughly about 280 to 300 horsepower. Paired with a fantastic 5-speed crash gearbox, with no reverse gear, of course. Crash gearbox, of course, is one where you have to basically double D-clutch, and it's designed so it lasts longer, as long as you know how to drive it. If you don't know how to drive it, then you're going to basically ruin it quicker. Now, what we mean by double D-clutching is if you're driving a manual before, you know how you sink in the clutch, put the gears in. With double D-clutch and with a crash box, you have to basically take the vehicle out of gear, put it into neutral, and then put it back into gear, so you have to clutch twice for it. However, you also have to rev the engine to roughly the same RPM as it's going at the time, otherwise you'll strip the gears. It takes a bit of skill to drive one, but they are they produce more power, they convert more power, things like that, and they're more speed. They're generally used for race cars, but tanks and often heavy trucks use them because they give the vehicle more torque and more power. Of course, no reverse gear is an interesting one because we do have that in game, and every source I've looked at says it doesn't have one, so interesting, that one. Now, the suspension is similar to the A1E1 Independence, and the T28, most interestingly, if you actually look at the T28 compared to this, you can see they're very similar, especially with their side skirts, both having the side skirts where they have the chutes to remove mud from the running wheels and the bogies. The tank has 13mm of hull armour with around 20mm in certain places, enough to stop shrapnel and rifle caliber rounds, but not really anything else. The idea, of course, with the tank was going to be a breakthrough vehicle, and the infantry, of course, were going to be following it to break through the enemy lines, as the name suggests. And that was really the idea of this longer tank. It was designed to go across trenches and help troops break through positions. Of course, this was not the case for the Panzer Corps, and the blitzkrieg tactics favoured by Hans Guderian. This meant the White Elephant, as it became known, the White Elephant of the Wehrmacht, was more of a training vehicle and propaganda machine than a military one. Often starring in newsreels, its imposing size impressed the masses, and untrained people, they saw it and just saw this massive tank with 3 turrets and lots of guns and just thought, wow, this thing must be amazing. Of course, anyone that actually knew anything was like, this is a bit of an elephant, it's not going to work very well. Now, the tank did see some action. A 3 tank group were sent to Norway for the Norwegian invasion. 2 broke down on the way to the front, and only 1 made it to the combat lines. It saw combat on April 22nd, 1940. The imposing tank drove to a British-Norwegian position. The Allied forces sort of saw this thing and thought, oh, we're going to die, we're in some serious trouble now, boys. But they loaded up their boys' .55-inch anti-tank rifle, the most common anti-tank rifle of the British Expeditionary Forces at the time, and let loose the 5-round magazine, easily penetrating the front armour, which, as I say, was only around 13mm, remember. 1 round killed one of the crew members. I imagine it would have been the front gunner, possibly one of the turret crew, though I'm not too sure, I can't find the information on who was actually taken out. But basically this was enough to make the crew go, oh bugger, we're in some trouble now. The tank retreated very quickly, the soldiers surprised by the ease of their victory and the tank's defeat. The Allied soldiers were actually baffled by this and thought, what the heck's going on, because this tank was in all the German newsreels and German press. It was considered to be the top German tank, and they just took it out with an anti-tank rifle with no trouble. The defeat was a bit of a blotch on the Germans' resume, so to say, and the NBFZ was pulled from frontline duties and was scrapped by around 1941-42. A small number of parts survive today, but that's about it. Now, there is sort of word in Ukraine that one of these tanks actually saw action against the BT-7 and was taken out of action there. Although, again, there's one of those sources that was just like, I'm not too sure, maybe this happened, maybe it didn't. There is also some sort of bits and bobs and hoo-ha around this being possibly the chassis used to start the Stuart Emil program. Again, possibly BS, but it could well be true as a test chassis / prototype chassis that this was used as a starting point. So, how is the, trying to attempt the name again, the Neubaufahrzeug in game? Now, we have the NBFZ Mark V in game, I think it is, but the B variant, basically, the croupe variant, which has the guns side by side. So you have a 47mm and, sorry, 47mm and the brain has gone absolutely dead there. 37mm and a 75mm. Sorry, I was getting my 2 measurements mixed up. So 2 relatively okay guns. With those guns, you get a heat shell, which has 80mm of penetration for the main gun, and that's the 75mm gun, of course. It has okay-ish ballistics, not very good though, but okay, and will cause a fair bit of damage if it penetrates. The secondary gun, the 37mm, has a APCR shell, which will have around about 90mm of penetration at long range. It has very good shell velocity, of course. With that, you can also change to a smoke shell or a APCBC shell for either the 75 or the 37mm. Overall, these guns aren't very good. You also get on you a couple of machine guns. You get the 2 machine gun turrets and a machine gun in your main turret as well. All of these are small rifle caliber round machine guns, so they don't have much punch to them. The tank's armour is one of its biggest weak points, because it is a very big target. It makes it very easy to take out. And as you can see, I've actually had to go to a custom battle to get this footage because I was struggling to get anything decent in this vehicle out in the matches. And the one good thing, I guess, is the fact you have so many crew members, so you can survive a hit or two, which does make it somewhat useful. The main thing for this vehicle, though, is it's a unique vehicle, and it's something you can go, oh, I've got this very cool vehicle. It's a vehicle to show off with. It is a very cool tank to have in your sort of armory and a tank to take out now and again. It is quite fun to play, it's not too slow or not too lumbersome, but all in all, if you're looking to buy a premium, there are better options. Okay guys, well I hope you've enjoyed this video and this little bit of history on this tank, a little bit of a shorter one today. As I said, it's an okay vehicle, but yeah, there are some better options out there. But still an interesting tank and an interesting footnote in history. Alright guys, until next time, this is me, Carl Squeezilla out. Bye bye!